You're gonna have to bear with me. I'm still dealing with the post lunchtime hiccups, but all the same, hello, hi, how are you? How are things going? How's your day? How have you been? Good. Wherever you're at, I hope it's well. I hope you're comfortable. And today, today's something. It's interesting because it's fundamental. I think more than anything else, especially when you're trying to write and write better, it's so critical to like get the fundamentals down and rehearsed and practiced more than anything else. There's so much like complicated theory. There's so much like big, heavy duty stuff that you can get lost in all the sauce for all the things. But it's the fundamentals, the absolute like here are the basic building blocks that can be drilled and rehearsed and trained and discussed and dissected into a million different degrees that I think are infinitely more interesting than finding out like which old white guy invented a thing. So today I've got scenes, the fundamental building block, the foundational pillar of story, the thing that makes your story a story. I want to talk about scenes. I want to make them interesting. I want to show you that it's not just about paragraphs. I want to show you that it's not just about like imagining a static picture in your head. I want to really talk about this. And I don't know if this is going to be like 20 minutes and we're out the door, or whether this is going to be an hour or 90 minutes or 2 hours, or who knows. Every time I've rehearsed this, and I've been rehearsing this for a couple days, it's been all over the place because of nerves, because of assumptions, because I just paused and had things be dramatic for a second. But my goal here today is to get you looking at simple writing things in new ways and get you thinking about complicated writing things in simple ways, because scenes are both simple and complicated. And scenes can be as messy or as long or as short or as all over the place as they possibly can be. And I'm painfully cognizant of people telling me, I drag on too much in my openings and then I repeat myself a lot. It's a bad habit. I know, working on it. So let's just go into the intro. Let's just get going. So, ladies and gentlemen, guys, gals, non-binary pals, friends, writers, makers, doers, dreamers, pantsers, plotters, soup enthusiasts, anybody who's ever driven on a gravel road, people who enjoy watching the fog either roll in or dissipate, anybody who's had lunch, anybody planning on having lunch, anybody who's planning on having dinner, every single person who's had at least one glass of water, anybody who's remembered to take their meds today, people who can spell a lot of different words except for like three or four, which they always spell wrong, even with autocorrect, anybody who's, learned about emoji, and most importantly, the comrades. Hi, I'm John. It's my job to help you write better. It's nice to be here. Thank you for coming. Hello, chat. Hi, it's good to see all of you. Good afternoon. You look lovely. We ready to do this? Today, scenes. And I'm going to use, shockingly, an example, and it's almost all in order. I want to do this um, pretty much from the beginning to the end, more or less. I think there's a couple times where I have to flip some stuff around, but mostly all my examples are in chronological order using Men in Black. Remember Men in Black? It's a really good movie. You should watch it if you haven't. It's on Amazon. It might even be on Netflix too. But eh, this is my examples for the day. We're going to talk Men in Black, and we're going to use that not so much to specifically highlight science fiction or anything, but just to talk about scene construction for whatever you're writing: romance, science fiction, fantasy, westerns, poetry. Well, not so much poetry. That'll be a different stream. We'll probably cover. Oh, we might have to do the Justice League cartoon to cover poetry, but that's a different day and a different issue altogether. But for now, I want to build scenes and I want to give you a toolkit. My goal here is to get you better equipped with some stuff you've probably known about or assumed, but nobody's ever really explained. I want to be the guy to explain that. That's what I love to do most anywhere, all the time. I love explaining stuff. I love making a thing and giving it some backstory and giving it some explanation and helping you feel like, oh, I can do a thing with this. So we're going to talk about scenes. We're going to cover the components of scenes, see everything that a scene has, whatever the scene is. Then we're going to talk about different types of scenes and how to do them, more or less. There's going to be some parts of this you probably already know, but you can't really get away with it. Some of this is going to be obvious because we're talking about stuff that is sort of the ground floor level of writing. Bear with me on that stuff because in and around this, there's some stuff you've probably never really thought about or considered. I'm going to try and do this without a lot of jargon. Some's going to seep in there, it's inescapable. But I'm going to try and do this with more explanation and more examples in and around Men in Black. But also, if something just pops in my head, we're going to get that too. So here we go. We're going to start with the components of scenes. These are things that all scenes have. I don't care what kind of scene it is. I don't care what movie it's in, what book it is, what, who it is, your story, my story, whatever. All scenes have some stuff. Now, sometimes they have some stuff more than others, but there's always going to be these components in some way, shape, or form. Okay. And we're going to start with the obvious stuff and drill down. So all scenes start with a location. Every scene takes place somewhere. Even if that scene is, a desert island, a city street. In the case of Men in Black, there's a scene in a Chinese restaurant. There's scenes in cars, on the moon, in somebody's head, in the past, in the present, wherever. All scenes take place somewhere. And all locations, that's all the places the scenes take place in, have some reason to exist in the story, even if that reason for being there is because, hey, that's where the scene takes place. For example, in Men in Black, this restaurant they're in for this moment early on is only here to have this moment. We can assume from context, oh, it's because, somebody wanted to eat something or this was visually interesting, but they're not coming back to this for the sake of the plot. They're not coming back to this because it's like the place where all the showdown occurs. It's just a place for a scene. Every location has to be described so the reader knows what to picture. Our goal, before anything else, is to put a movie in the reader's brain, and locations are where that movie takes place. What we're trying to do in these locations is figure out a couple things. We want to figure out the position of the characters. Where are they? What are they doing? But also the position of the reader. We're going to get a little abstract. Hang on. You want to make sure the reader feels like they're in a room that they could reach out and interact with anything in the space. You want to make sure the reader is positioned somewhere in the room that they get the best, I'm making air quotes, the best view of the action. Whatever's the important thing. Hey, focus on this kind of stuff. That seat that you position the reader in moves. It can move in the middle of a sentence. It can move on a sentence per sentence basis. It is not fixed. It is not locked. And they're not mandatory. We can move them all around as we need to. We can zoom way the hell in and go look up Will Smith's nose. We can zoom way out and park them all the way across the room. We can float them on the ceiling. We're not limited in direction. We're not limited in, anything. Hi, guys. It's good to see you. We want to position the reader where they will get the best, and we're calling it the best because there's more complicated jargon, but the best seat to see or gain the information they need. Not only the critical stuff. We're not going to say, okay, we need to zoom in this far and see these things specifically because that's the plot. We're looking for the best overall seat. It's easiest, cleanest, most interesting, most engaging to position the reader here as though they are sort of at the end of the table watching Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones equally, sort of the left and right side of the screen. That's our choice for where the reader, the viewer in this case, is positioned. Now, in the course of this conversation, we're going to move the reader. We're going to cut away so that we're facing Tommy Lee Jones, or we're going to cut away and face Will Smith directly. So now the reader all of a sudden is sitting next to the other character. We can move the reader all we want. We can move the reader a billion times. You want to try not to do it like so much so quickly because it gets very jarring. But you want to decide, okay, here's my scene. This is what's going on in it. Where is the reader positioned? Too often, especially in third person, too often the writer decides, hey, we're going to take these characters and just put them over here. I'm making a vague, distant hand gesture. Yeah, they're just over there. Characters are walking, hiking, running across New Zealand, coming, walking down the driveway, going to the grocery store, wherever. The reader is some distance away. And that's a fine decision. Like, that's okay. It's all right. But it's a weak decision. It is ultimately going to be a poor decision because you have more control over that and you should be exercising that control. You get to say, no, I can part the reader anywhere. So I'm going to put them real close to this because it's important, because I want them to feel, I want them to see, I want them to experience things in a certain way. You have control over that. Now, how does that express itself? You write sentences so that if the reader's eyes are the thing describing these stuff, how much the eye sees is how many words go in the sentence. The information you provide, the descriptive material, the explanations, the sharing, the whatever you want to call it, needs to make the space, the location feel as real as possible. That does not mean, underline that a few times, you have to like pack this thing with a billion details. We don't have to know the history of the wallpaper. We don't have to know exactly how many stones are in the gravel. It's not a matter of informing your reader with so much information that it's overwhelming. We're purposeful in choosing how we describe things. You don't want to do too little and just say, oh, it's a restaurant, because that just seems like you started a thought and then stopped. And we don't want to be so hyper detailed that we lose sort of that sense of why we're in the room in the first place. You get to pick and choose what details, and you get to pick and choose how you describe each of those details so that the reader feels like, with this information they're gaining, viewing the scene as they're viewing it, the distance between the reader and whatever the hell you're describing is the best distance to convey that information. Location is our first sort of element of or component of a scene, because without a location, there really isn't a scene. It doesn't have any framing. It doesn't have any context. You don't have to describe everything. You don't have to only describe the critical stuff. You don't have to only describe the stuff that characters interact with. You can describe anything. And you don't have to do it to the umpteenth degree all the time. Remember, if we're trying to make a place feel like a real place, it's not a matter of covering the whole room in every inch. Oh, it's curtains and there's exactly this many panes in the window, and there's a plant over here and it has this many leaves. Quantity of information is not as valuable as quality of information. The reader wants context. The reader gets that context, that sense of, oh, I see how this material plugs into and connects with the other stuff you told me. The reader gets that from quality information. Too much information, too many things, every zipper and button and fiber and plant and this and that, too much, and they won't know what's important, because it'll come across to the reader as though, oh, the writer's just telling me all this stuff is important. And that's not, you know, that's not what we want either. We want a location that feels like the reader and the characters are in the same place, and that the reader is positioned where they need to be. That's item number one. On we go. Item number two. And again, I apologize. This one's really obvious. There have to be characters. There are always characters in a scene. Always. Now, we're going to throw some wrinkles in this because not all characters are people. Sometimes you have paragraphs just describing the moat of the castle. But in this case, the character in the scene is this moat. Or we're talking about how this is the seventh planet of this system and the spaceship is orbiting it, et cetera, et cetera. The character, the thing at the heart of the scene, is the planet. And you want to describe it in some way so that it seems less like a set designer came around with a spray can and sort of spray painted a canvas that a camera shot, and make it feel more like, oh, I'm observing a planet from a distance. I, the reader, am positioned in space. There's always a character. Always. Not all characters are people. Sometimes the non-people stuff are your characters and should be handled accordingly, which means there's always stuff happening in a scene. We're going to talk about that more specifically in a second. But there's always a character in a scene, and that character is always going to do stuff. Whether that's one character, 5 characters, 1,000 characters, all the characters, whatever. You've got to have some character in a scene, even if that character is just the bright sunny day of downtown Chicago or something. Always, always, always a character. Find it. Make note of it. If for some reason you swear up and down, you've got a scene with no characters whatsoever, I'm going to ask you why that scene is in your manuscript. What's it doing? What should the reader imagine when they read this? Why should they care? How does this help you? Is this just taking up space? There's always a character. In Men in Black, for instance, it's all these military guys sitting in those weird chairs from the 70s. It just is. On we go. Here's where things pick up, because scenes, locations, and characters are obvious. There's people, they're doing stuff, they have to be doing stuff in a place. It's a given. But now we're going to drill in, because every character in a scene has a goal. Every single one of them. Not just our main character, not just the goon they're trying to fight. Having read many fantasies that have no scenes with no characters, it's word salad, a bunch of random junk. Yes, scenes with no characters can get very word salady. Absolutely, because it just becomes a stream of consciousness. But if you were to take one of the non-people things and treat it the way you treat your characters, the word salad suddenly gets a purpose. It suddenly feels more substantial because, oh, we're focused. The writer isn't just like vomiting out 100 words about like the day. We're making it matter. So don't, how do I want to say this? Don't get bogged down in trying to write too lean or too fat. Simply think of something as a center point or a centerpiece for your scene, and it's going to like tie that together. But yeah, try not to do this like constantly. Don't get so abstract that we lose ourselves in the look how far up my ass I can get my headness of it. I'm going to come back to goals. All characters of all size, all shape, all color, all persuasion in the story have a goal. Even if that goal is to just be in the background and walk from point A to point B, or deliver a monologue, or pour coffee, or just sit in a room because the scene takes place in a waiting room. They're just there. They have a goal. They're doing something, even if that something is nothing. I'm making air quotes. All those characters with their goal, they will attempt to do those goals somehow. How they attempt to do those goals is that they use their skills. We've talked about characters and skills when we've built characters before. Characters attempt their goals by using their skills and whatever they know and whatever they're able to do, penned in by their moral code. Now, that makes great sense for background characters whose job it is just to walk from point A to point B. People crossing the street in the background of a scene, they're just gonna, walk from point A to point B. They're not gonna suddenly fly. They're not gonna defy gravity. They're not gonna suddenly start hurling magical spells to eliminate the people in traffic. They're just gonna walk from point A to point B. Do not neglect minor characters and minor character goals. Likewise, don't go all in on major characters. You just don't need to. It doesn't, it's not about solely focusing on one person and all the stuff they're saying and all the stuff they're doing. You want to, again, move the reader around to give that, not necessarily the most complete. It's not like we're trying to 100% a video game or something, but you want to give the reader a sense of completeness to your thought. So to do that, we're going to move as needed. And we're going to remember that everybody's trying to do something. And your ability to focus on the something the character is doing, whoever they are, is going to go a long way in helping the reader feel like, oh, this matters because we're talking about it. If you focus on small stuff in the background too much, the reader kind of wonders why we're spending so long talking about the people in the back, or why we're talking about just these small little things, because the reader sees all the words and says, well, that's a lot of words. This must be important. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter in the grand scheme of it, but the reader's always going to do that math, whether we intend it or not. So we want to stay focused on how we describe whatever we're describing, not in a minimum number of words, not in a hurry, but just effectively. And that takes trial and error. Understanding your character's goal. What's this person doing right now? Why are they doing this? How are they doing this? What are they trying to get? What are they trying to accomplish? What are they trying to lose? What are they trying to do? Thinking about things on that level is not always done. It's easiest for your main character. You know what they're going to do. They're trying to do the plot. They're trying to, solve the crime and fight the bad guy and win the prize at the end. But apply that same logic, that same strategy to everybody. And immediately you're going to get way more density of ideas. You're going to get a lot more detail. You're going to get a lot more construction and a lot more potential to stuff. Because now everybody's trying to do something. It's not like those in those action movies where like our main hero is squaring off with a guy, and then there's like 15 guys kind of waiting in a circle and they just take turns fighting. We don't want that. We don't want that sense of like, oh, I guess it's my turn to get jump kicked in the face. We want that sense of everybody trying to do something. Small thing, big thing, near, far, wherever. Everybody's got a goal. Everybody's doing something. As in the case of our example, our goals are like this. Tommy Lee Jones is trying to explain in a really, really good monologue to Will Smith about sort of the nature of things and the questions and challenges posed ahead of him and what he can expect and what he should think about in this moment. Will Smith's goal is to listen. Very simple. His one goal, Will Smith's goal, is a reactive goal, a reactionary goal to Tommy Lee Jones's goal of, I'm going to tell this guy stuff. Goals are often like that. I do a thing, so somebody else has a response. That's fine. That helps those things feel organized because you're building a relationship between the two of them. It can be that simple. Not all goals for all people are like big melodramatic things like, I must sit here and look soulfully at Tommy Lee Jones because in an hour and 4 minutes, the plot will be very plotty and I have to do stuff. No, sometimes the character is just of the moment, doing a thing in the moment, and it can be straightforward like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, totally legit. Every character has a goal in every scene. And when they go to the next scene, they still have goals. It might be the same goal as before, or it might be changed. Who knows? We won't know till we get there. But for now, we're only ever in the scene we're in. We're only ever dealing with the goal we're dealing with. We're only ever doing what we're doing. And we're only ever like able to frame this in kind of an immediate way, so to speak, if that makes sense. Everybody good? Should we keep moving? Because we're going to go a little bit deeper now. So let's say we've got a character with a goal. Doesn't matter what the goal is. For our example, Will Smith is now a man in black, and he's gone off to go deal with an alien issue. The goal in front of your character gets broken down into pieces. And the character's first move is to always assess their understanding of the goal. What do I have to do? How big a deal is it to me? How hard do I think this is going to be? And how much effort should I put into this? All those guesses, all that stuff, we kind of label that as perceived emotional temperature. The idea that here's the character's perspective. This is what their relationship to the goal in front of them is. This is how they think it's going to be. They're going to fuck around. And then there's the other side of it. the actual emotional temperature, how things really are. They fucked around before, now they're going to find out. It applies to all characters doing all things. So Will Smith here thinks he's just going to like, he's got to go deliver a baby. Okay. His relationship to this idea, his estimation of how difficult or how simple it is, or how much of a pain in the ass it's going to be, gives him a certain level. We often measure it 1 to 10, 1 being no big deal, whatever. I'm going to just pass you the salt when you ask for it, versus 10 of, oh my God, the world's coming to a screeching halt. Helps us scale and understand these things. But his PET's perceived emotional temperature is, this is a pain in the ass. This sucks. You serious? You're going to have me deliver a baby. That's the face he's making on the left side of our graphic. Meanwhile, Tommy Lee Jones pulls the guy over here aside. He's sort of at center screen and explains the situation, while Will Smith has to go deal with a tentacle coming out of a station wagon, because that's the actual emotional temperature, how things actually are. I thought it was going to be easy. I thought this was going to be just sort of a dull little thing. And now, holy shit, there's tentacles at the station wagon. PET and AET don't necessarily have to zero out. We're not trying to get each of them to be, the same number. If I think this is a big deal and it is a big deal, great. It's okay. It's not the end of the world, but we're not always trying to get the two things equal, because sometimes that's just sort of boring. If I expect a thing to be that, a certain amount of hard, and it's interesting, but not necessarily more interesting than if I under or overestimate myself or a situation. Think about scaling these things in a couple different ways here. If you have a character who assumes something is very easy, or assumes something is no big deal, so they act in a certain way because who gives a shit, whatever. They have a very low PET. And then all of a sudden it turns out that this thing is a huge deal and they should not have been, disregarding it so much. The AET is much higher. We'll talk about what happens when you get a discrepancy between these two things in a second. But most of the time, when you get a discrepancy between PET and AET, overall, you are creating some kind of tension and some kind of challenge in a scene. So often, story moves forward, character arc advances, plot develops, story becomes more engaging, the reader cares more when those two numbers, PET and AET, are different, and different by some significance. Now, not everything is going to be a 1 and a 2 or a 9 and a 10. Most of the time, you're going to cap out at around a 7 or an 8, except for your climax, which maybe will go to a 9 or 10, but that's about it. And your characters shouldn't really always be rocking with a 1 and a 2, because they're really hard to motivate. Don't get bogged down in the numbers here. I use the numbers as a way of sort of shorthanding it, and they're not a hard science here. It's not like everybody agrees on what a 2 is. But we want to set this up in such a way that it's easy for us, writing wise, to understand, oh, this is how a character feels and acts in this moment. They think it's a 2, so they act like that. They do this action. I mean, the writer would describe that action in a certain way because, whatever, they're dismissive. They make a hand gesture. But then all of a sudden, that, whatever, eye roll moment from our YA protagonist suddenly has huge consequences later because of the discrepancy between PET and AET. And just to help tie this together to what we've already talked about, this is everything, every challenge, every goal a character has. Every one of them in any scene, all the scenes, all the time. What happens when those two numbers don't mesh? What happens when we've got a discrepancy, a disparity between PET and AET on our way to our goal? We create challenge. There's a tension between this idea of like, I think it should be easy to do this. And then it turns out, it's not that easy at all. Or I think this is going to be really difficult. And then it turns out to be a piece of cake. The disparity here creates tension. And that tension requires resolution. It's sort of like coiling a spring or shaking up a soda bottle and then, needing it to open to eject the soda because we have to release that pressure. Challenge is what gives a scene meat, material, meaning, potential, energy, vibrance, whatever you want to call it. Your challenge is sort of the sum of your distance, your discrepancy between PET and AET, plus other factors. What's going on in the moment, how big a deal everything is, how urgently it needs to happen, the time and tone and theme and all that come together. And to develop challenge in a scene, and all scenes have challenge, we have to think about what the characters want. What does A want? What does B want? In our Men in Black scene, we've moved a little bit forward in the timeline. We have Will Smith talking to, I'm going to blank on her name. Will Smith talking to the morgue person about a dead body that came in, trying to figure out like what's going on and what she knows. He has an estimation of how easy or hard that's going to be. She has an estimation of how easy or hard it's going to be to tell him or not tell him or find out what's going on. To whittle that down, to sort that out as a writer, you have to ask, who wants what in this scene? What does he want? What does she want? Why can't they just automatically get what they want? Why is it difficult? What's the challenge here? What's the obstacle here? Well, he can't reveal that he's part of a secret, government agency, that's protecting the world. And she doesn't know the strangeness and oddity of it. And these unknown quantities are making it challenging, are making it difficult because the character has to navigate them in some way to either reveal or not reveal or do or not do in order to get things to click. So we shorthand that. We boil it down to, what does character A want? What does character B want? And then we add one extra step and go, why can't they get it? He wants answers. She wants answers. So why can't they get it? They both want answers because they don't want the same answer. She wants to know what's going on and how all this strangeness really, what it means to her world, but it's going to rattle her worldview. He wants answers because he's part of this sort of whole new view behind the curtain. It's Linda. Yeah, it is Linda Fiorentino. Excellent. So it's Linda Fiorentino. Thank you. I knew somebody somewhere would tell me. But Linda wants something. Will wants something. They have to act in a certain way. They might want answers, and we would broadly say they want more or less the same answers. They want to know what's going on. But the agendas that get them there, the motivations that get them there, the way they're getting there, totally different. Yeah, they're asking questions. Yes, they're talking. Okay. But they're not talking about the same thing. They're not using the same words. They're not using the same meaning on each word. They're not using the same context. What does A want? What does B want? Why can't they get it? All characters, they want to accomplish their goal, and they will do whatever they can to accomplish that goal. Your job as a writer is to make the reason for accomplishing that goal matter. Not just tell them, hey, this guy wants to do this thing. This lady wants to do that thing. Because that's nice. That's part of it. But don't stop there. John wants to have a good stream. John wants to say this sentence. We shouldn't even go with good stream. That's a totally different issue. John wants to stream. How can we modify that? He wants to do a good stream. Well, what does a good stream mean? He's got an audience. He wants to inform people. He wants a good response. He would love one or two more thumbs up because it would feed his ego, and then he'd be less nervous. So he'd do more streams so that he can, grow this thing so that he can get monetized on YouTube. And then, he can feed his cat. There's always a goal. There's always an effort to accomplish that goal. The challenge comes from how the character attempts to accomplish that goal and how hard or easy they think it is, how hard or easy it actually is, plus all the other factors out of their control. All the other people trying to do a thing or interact or engage or stop or do their own thing, running into everybody else. Think about 10,000 like 10,000 balls bouncing off one another in a room, a very busy, everybody on a trampoline bouncing around. Interaction with things, collision with things changes things. That kind of bounce and reciprocity and movement and interaction affects challenge. What does A want? What does B want? Why can't A or B get it? Take that with you. Every scene for every character. Yep. Even the people in the background walking from here to there. What do they want? Why can't they get it? What's in the way? What don't they know? What do they know? What are they overestimating? What are they underestimating? How can we convey this tension, this unknownness, this challenge to the reader to make the reader go, oh, I got to keep reading. I want to see how this turns out. Challenge. Let's add one more layer. All scenes of all different kinds have what I generally term to environment. Now, that's not just location. Too many times writing advice sort of lumps environment in with location because it's a word we commonly think of when we think about places. Environment in a writing context has to do with all the stuff outside the character's control that impacts the character, like gravity, weather, rain, humidity, quantity of people, traffic, time. Environment is a ton of different factors that press in on, push, and exert force against the characters trying to accomplish their goals. Now, for our scene here, our example, Will Smith is sitting here watching the sunset, at the on the bench, just kind of getting his head around the idea of what the world is, what the world was, and what the world could be. The forces that are pressing on him are in his head. He's got to grapple with these questions. He's got to sort of sit and come to a decision. There's nobody else in the scene. That's what makes the scene potent. It's not like somebody's lecturing him. He's just sitting here thinking, feeling the weight of his feelings. Those are pressures exerted by the environment of the scene. We bring environment into scenes because we're trying to make the scenes feel something less like this person did this thing. This person did this thing here. We're not writing like a Dr. Seussian sort of in a box with Fox wearing socks. We're trying to, give the reader a sense of sitting with the character in this moment in their head, having some access to their thoughts, expressing and feeling the ideas so that the reader can express and feel them too, so that we know this is a big deal for our character. What forces you get to choose what forces press and push on the character to what degree in what moment. Sometimes it's going to be, I'm late. I missed my bus because traffic was really bad, or because the bus broke down, or because I overslept my alarm, or because I got into a fight in that other scene with somebody and it delayed me 5 minutes, or I left my papers back at the office and I have to go back and problems ensue. Do not neglect the environment. Do not neglect the factors and forces outside the character's control that help set mood and tone and illustrate theme. The reason they're out of the character's control directly is because if they were under the character's control, it would be slightly less interesting because the character could just do whatever they need to do. We need the world to press in and push and compel and pressure and impede and all that stuff to make the world feel more substantial, make it feel more real. Another good example is when Brad Pitt watches the sunset before being vamped. Yes, absolutely. Also, there's a great version of it in the TV show. You get this moment of weightiness, this moment of import because, oh my God, it's such a big deal. Brad Pitt or Jacob Anderson isn't going to see the sun anymore. So it's this monumental thing because, hey, then, we're going to go hang out with a vampire. That's the environment. Those are the factors. The all those moments where David Tennant is standing in the rain watching Catherine Tate, realizing that the doctor has to leave Donna behind. That's an environmental scene. Same is true with the doctor and Rose in a different universe. You get all these different kinds. It's not. I'm grabbing examples that are very memeable and gifable and are sort of sad, but I don't mean to, because you can do this for positive things too. Moments where the hero decides he's going to go, don the uniform and go march into battle, or, reforge the sword and go fight the orcs. You can do it positively, or get up and fight the next round in the Rocky movie. The environment and the environmental factors affect character by modifying their goals, by making the goals possible, by changing some rule or dynamic in the location, by giving a character, by putting in a new character. The environment is sort of the big extra pile of factors that come in to manipulate and affect stuff. Shall we keep moving? I think so. I think we're doing all right. Let me just scroll for a second, because now we're going to break down types of scenes. And first, we're going to do a little bit of a disclaimer. There are 43 different types of scenes. You will never in your long life ever need to know all 43. They don't even test all 43 in school anymore. They somewhere test between like 6 and 12. Most of the time people teach like 4, maybe 6. And that's fine, because a lot of these scenes are very similar. Like when you start splitting hairs about, well, this is this kind of scene, but now they're sitting. It's different, but it's different in that sort of like obnoxious school way. And that's not going to help you. So we're going to cover some types of scenes just individually, but don't sweat all 43. Like nobody gives a shit. It's not going to help you like understand that, oh, I should have used type number 36. No, you should have written whatever scene's good. Don't get bogged down in the terms. There's no quiz at the end of this. It's not going to be on the final. But let's do some scenes. We're going to start with exposition, because that's going to be the bulk of what you're writing. Exposition scenes are scenes that share and express information so that the reader gains knowledge about all the other stuff, the characters, the plot, the world, the room, the atmosphere, whatever. Exposition is the presentation of information to your reader. Straightforward. This could be a paragraph. This could be a page. This could be 10 pages. This could be the opening 4 paragraphs. This could be whole chunks of book. Exposition. In Men in Black, we get a great example when he's first introduced sort of to the Men in Black facility and sees aliens and sees everybody in the white shirts and ties, and shockingly, they're all white dudes, and how we're just sort of moving around with this world now behind the curtain. Exposition matters. You're going to write more of it than nearly anything else. Good, I'm making air quotes, good exposition has a variety of sentences, a variety of sentence lengths, a variety of sentence complexities, and it does its job of, hey, reader, here's a thing you know that you didn't know before, or here's more detail about a thing you already knew. And it moves the reader along. Every sentence is a camera showing or confirming or detailing existing information. Everything comes out in some way, shape, or form through exposition of some kind or another. You can't really get away without exposition. You can you can skip some of these scene types. It's possible. You got to plan a little bit, make an outline, make some really deliberate choices. You can get away with a book with no dialogue. You can get away with a book with no overt action beats, no big gunfights or no big car chases or something. You can get away with a book with a story that doesn't necessarily have a lot of like character internal development. You can. It's possible. You can't really get away from exposition. It wouldn't make sense otherwise. Even if you argue, well, yeah, it would just be a screenplay, wouldn't it? No, because a screenplay still has stage direction and there's still something conveyed in the characters talking. Exposition is critical. We've talked about it before, elsewhere on the YouTube channel, as well as the podcast and everything else. We talk a lot about exposition. On we go. Dialogue. Everybody and their mother, as well as their mother's mother, swears up and down that they do great dialogue. And sometimes that's true, but sometimes it is painfully not true. Dialogue scenes are just talking scenes. Scenes where characters are saying things, maybe to each other, maybe to rooms full of people, maybe multiple people are talking, 2, 3, 4, 5, 30, however many. Dialogue scenes. The big thing I want you to know is that with all these characters talking, as in Men in Black, it's where Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones are sort of receiving their briefing on the plot of the story. Characters are sitting down talking. One person's talking, multiple people are listening. So there's one speaker and two recipients or listeners. That's the common language we talk about when we talk about framing dialogue scenes. Who's your speaker? Who's your listener or your audience? And then, of course, all the other rules apply. So the reader here is on, for the moment, on this side of a glass partition, seeing this, and then we go through the room and in the room and we're sitting down and all that. In a dialogue scene, your dialogue has to sound like people talking, even if the beings that are doing the speaking are themselves not human. Robots, vampires, angels, demons, Muppets, whatever. They have to sound human to some degree because your reader is human. Now, that doesn't mean, and we've talked about this before when we've talked about dialogue, that doesn't mean you got to throw in modern slang or anything, but it does mean you need to convey information in a way that is relatable to the human experience of the reader. Oh, that sounds like something somebody would say given the situation that they're in. That said, you don't want to recap the plot. You can talk about the plot, as in the case here with Men in Black, where our, Rip Torn is telling Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith, hey, here's the case, here's what's going on. You can convey information that way, an info dump, which, for the record, are not automatically bad and should not automatically be burned with fire or nuked from orbit. They're just ways of conveying information. You don't want to always do them in the same way that, when all you have is a hammer, not everything is a nail, but info dumps are useful. They get information across to the reader. But what you want to avoid is having characters sort of exclusively talk about the plot in detail over and over, because it gives the impression that you don't think the reader will remember the plot. You think the reader's kind of stupid, or that for some reason the characters don't remember the plot and they have to constantly sort of like bring it up in an insincere, manufactured way. Here's an example. In the fourth Indiana Jones movie, there's the reason why this rule is this rule. There's this moment where Indiana Jones and Marion are driving through the jungle just before the climax of the movie, where Indiana Jones turns to her and goes, we have to go to the temple and we have to do the thing and save the whatever. And there is a lot going on in the Raiders info dump. We get the, Porkins and the other guy are doing stuff, but we're going to back up a minute and cover the plot don't live rule. And then we'll talk Raiders for a second. He turns to older Indiana Jones, turns to older Marion and says, we have to go to the temple and do the thing. The characters involved in that conversation already know what they have to do because they're doing it. You don't have to have a scene where Tommy Lee Jones turns to Will Smith and goes, hey, look, Will Smith, we have to go do the thing, because they were all in the room together when Rip Torn was talking. You don't have to explain the plot all the time. You just have to get the reader aware of the plot and then move the ball forward. Keep us going on. You can talk about how hard or easy it is. Holy shit, this is a real pain in the ass, this plot. But you don't have to stop and recap it so much. Reader hasn't forgotten. The viewer doesn't remember. When an info dump is done well, as it is in Raiders, you get a lot of information, plot, but also you discover a lot of character information, because Indiana Jones grabs that big book, the big Bible, drops it on the table and explains the headpiece of the Staff of Ra, while also conveying about the city of Tanis and Abner Ravenhood. We should at some point cover Raiders of the Lost Ark in its entirety as an example of how to do a variety of different storytelling. But an info dump can be dense with information, not limited to plot. You can reveal character. You can reveal world building. You can reveal, inter-character relationships. All these different things through this one scene where your structure is basically a dialogue scene. You can cover a lot of ground in a scene. You're not limited just because a scene is of a certain type. Now, it's worth pointing out that in dialogue scenes, the other major factor here is that time doesn't freeze. One of the big problems you get when you're editing and revising dialogue scenes is that people do a lot of talking, character A and character B go back and forth over and over, blah, 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 blah. So many things, as if the world is just paused because the characters have to get this information out. So, you know, we're going to, two characters, they stop walking and they keep talking at each other forever. And then you have a sentence like, well, then they resumed walking. That's fine. You've paused the walking action, but you have not necessarily paused like the birds in the trees, the passage of time and weather, the urgency by which the story has to continue. Don't forget time. Don't forget, that the story is always moving forward, even if the characters aren't. And don't let your plot live as a constant recap in your dialogue, but let your characters interact through their dialogue with the events of the plot, with what's going on, with each other, with themselves. Dialogue is a revelation for readers. Oh, that's how the character feels. Oh, that helps me relate to this person. Dialogue is hugely important, but it's important to also remember that talking about a thing and doing a thing are not the same. I can tell you I'm going to go eat lunch, or I can tell you I'm going to go in the other room, but until I get out of my chair and go, or until I make some food, am I going to do the thing? Talking is not doing. Shall we go on? Action scenes. Action scenes are where characters do stuff. It's where things happen, predicated on a character making a decision and acting on that decision, doing something about that decision. Now, what that decision is, well, here's where we get a little bit fancy. So there's a couple different kinds of decision in an action scene. We've talked about this before. Let's go over it one more time. There's the immediate and there's the long term. The immediate decision is the decision to do the thing right now. Like, holy shit, we have to run out of the room because we just ran away from, we have to chase Vincent D'Onofrio. That's this scene from Men in Black. The immediate decision is run. But the long-term decision is sort of the bigger picture. We zoomed out a little bit. We have to catch Vincent D'Onofrio. An action scene is any scene where a character is doing something because of a decision they make. Now, I had a professor years ago, I'm assuming he's still alive, years ago tell me that all scenes are action scenes, which is technically true. Everybody's always doing something, even if they're just laying there or whatever. But it doesn't ultimately matter. Like, who cares if everything is an action scene? The fact that we can broadly label something doesn't help us. We need to think in the more zoomed in. We need to think more on the proximity of stuff. What's this character doing right now? How does what the character is doing right now fit into a larger zoomed out view? All right, so they're running out of the room now to go get in the car to chase Vincent D'Onofrio. That's the long term. Where does the tension from an action come in? The tension in an action is the possibility of failure or the possibility of consequences. If they run out of this room or if they don't catch him, something bad could happen. Or they might run into this problem or they might deal with this. The if, I'm making air quotes, the if in your action scene, and there's going to be more than one, that if matters because it's the if and either the want to get the if we catch him, we can save the day, or the avoidance of the if we aren't fast enough, he'll kill everybody and they'll all die. Dealing with that if is what moves a character forward through an action scene. Keep your if in mind for every character involved in that action scene. Even if there's like 65 people, even if it's a whole army lined up in New Zealand going to go fight some orcs, there's all an if for them. Whatever one you want to zero in on, they're dealing with an if. It might be similar to the if of the guy next to him, but everybody's got an if. And action scenes are based on decisions, the potential for decisions, the potential for a reward, If I do this and it goes well, dot, 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 or the potential for failure. If I do this and it doesn't go well, then dot, dot, dot. Think about if and think about potential. And in conveying this information, Frodo struggling with Gollum for the ring is a huge thing. Gollum biting his fingers, Frodo, holding the ring aloft as Isildur did, wondering if I should drop it. No, I can't drop it. Anything like that. What's the if? And remember, we can go all the way back to challenges. Remember, we can go pretty far back here. Where is it? Challenge. Because what does character A want? What does character B want? Why can't they get it? That's as true for a dialogue scene. I want to tell you this, you want to tell me that. I want to hear you, you want to ignore me, you want to do this. We're competing in our dialogue or whatever, as it is in an action scene where I want to run and you want to flee and I want to catch you and we're playing tag. These rules apply no matter what kind of scene we have. The if in an action scene is the same as an if in a dialogue scene. Only the action, making air quotes, of a dialogue scene is talking. The if in an exposition scene, because I know one or two of you listening to this is going to go, yeah, well, what's the if there? The if in an exposition scene is your ability to relay the information to the reader. If they can picture this, they'll stay engaged. If not, they'll space the fuck out or go put the book down or go check their phone for the umpteenth time, and it'll be harder for them to pay attention in the story. There's always an if. There's always a person and a goal and a reward and a challenge and an effort. Sometimes it's the reader, sometimes it's the characters, but it's always there. Action scenes are scalar to some degree. Action scenes early on are generally less difficult than action scenes later on because, again, we're 3-act structure. We're building towards a climax. Bigger deal, bigger challenge, bigger stakes, bigger reward. Building and building and building and building until we reach the climax, the top of the story. Which brings us to the climax. Your climax scene is the peak of storytelling, where everything, or at least as much as possible, is brought to a single decision or the potential for a single action to happen as much as possible. Frodo can keep the ring. Gollum can get the ring. The ring can be destroyed or not. The destruction of the ring prompts the destruction of the Eye of Sauron, which helps routes the forces and allows the Age of Man to charge the orcs down. Everything, or at least the big stuff, gets driven to a single point or decision. Find it. Whether it's two people in love figuring out they love each other on a cold, rainy night, or whether it's the person running to stop the plane before their beloved escapes, thinking that they were secretly hated this whole time, or the space battle and the guy in the space biplane shoots the missiles into the secret base and blows up the samurai. Whatever it is, the climax has a singular point where it has the most meaning out of anything in the story, the most potential, the most danger, the biggest risk, the biggest reward, the biggest shock, the biggest fill in the blank. Figure out what that is and work backwards from it, and your climax will naturally pull together more effectively than if you were just having things together, just all kind of cluttered and messy and banging. You want your climax to be the top of the mountain. Just picture a mountaintop. Eventually there's a summit. Eventually there's a single thing, and then it's all downhill from there. Which leads us to resolution. Resolution is the end of the story. We're coming down the mountain. And resolution is shorthanded to how loops get closed, which means I'm going to explain loop theory again. Now, I want to point out for people who have listened to the podcast that at no point in 20-something years has anything been as talked about in anything I've ever done as loop theory because, frankly, I have sucked at explaining it for years. It's one of my favorite things. It's a great way to explain stuff, but it is so visual or so abstract that it really doesn't click for a lot of people. Thankfully, here we are with Men in Black, so I can illustrate what a loop is. Resolution is the closure of loops, as many as possible. In the same way that a climax is the highest point of as many elements as possible, resolution is the closure of as many loops as possible. What's a loop? A loop is a set of events in a story. They're a set of conditions, a set of actions, a set of some things that have some kind of relationship to each other. And they start, and they develop, and they end. Now, in Men in Black, we have a loop around the memory flashy light thingy. I'm sure it has a name. I can't remember it. It doesn't really matter. But the loop goes like this. We see this device first get used early on in the opening of our movie. Tommy Lee Jones has one. Now, throughout the movie, we see this device come out at a number of different occasions, almost always by Tommy Lee Jones to somebody else to flash a red light. Then they sort of stand there like a dope. And then they're told something, and then that's what they believe. And they sort of lose their memory. And it becomes this very important device for advancing the story. And we've watched over the course of this movie, this tool come out again and again and again, sometimes in comedic ways, sometimes in serious ways. But we've seen this tool come out again and again to accomplish this goal. Now, we could just have it be a thing that shows up, be a thing that shows up, be a thing that shows up, and have a loop of events, a set of these related actions, just be, well, somebody uses the flashy light thingy, a neuralizer. Sure. Name didn't really matter, but let's use neuralizer now that it's a thing. You could have a loop, a set of information where it's just scene where neuralizer gets used. 1, 2, 3. I think it gets used 5 times in the story, maybe 6. You could just have that be a loop, and then the resolution is the last time it gets used. It's used 6 times, regardless of context, regardless of effort. It's just used. But we don't only want a loop counting quantity, right? We're not just ticking, number of guests coming into a room. We're making it more material than that. We've watched this tool get used in impactful ways. And we've also watched the relationship between Tommy Lee Jones's character and Will Smith's character grow and develop over time, in the same way that in the opening of our movie, we watched the relationship between Tommy Lee Jones and his other partner develop, and we sort of see Tommy Lee Jones neuralize his old partner to move the story forward. And now, having established the way the neuralizer works, the nature of the partnership relationship, the nature of the relationship between these two people, we can close this loop of partners and growth and neuralizer use, because Tommy Lee Jones gives the neuralizer to Will Smith, so that now Tommy Lee Jones gets neuralized and we move the story forward. That's a loop. We can call that the neuralizer loop. That's the role of the device as it plays in the story and the impact it has on the story going forward. That's a loop. We can also say that the climax of the story, the action scenes of your story, are a loop. We started our story with Will Smith chasing an alien. We started our story gaining an idea of joining the Men in Black and developing a case. And then we had another action scene where we, chased some more aliens and ran into Vincent D'Onofrio until we drove a flying car, and then, took care of Vincent D'Onofrio as an alien bug and moved the story forward until we blew him up with lasers and stuff. Think of loops as sets of information that develop a certain idea and then conclude. Now, why I didn't explain loops like this the first 5 times, I have no idea, but I'm working on that now. So let's keep going. You are going to close a number of loops. How many? I don't know. It depends on how many things you bring up in your story. You can have loops like, I will become a Jedi and I will go with you to Alderaan, or I will, we close the big series loop with, you failed your highness. I'm a Jedi like my father before me. Now we're going to yeet you down a space hole. Loads of stories have loops, things started, things developed, and things finished. Loops allow the reader or the viewer to attach emotionally to a thing, to see the meaning of something, to get why something is important, not just the accomplishment of a task, but why it matters to the characters, why it matters to the situation. Loops do that. And resolution is the critical part of that, where the loop gets closed, the thing gets answered, the story can move on. We're no longer going to do anything with it. We're going to tie it up. Nice, neat, and pretty with a bow. That's resolution. You also have resolution scenes inside acts, right? The resolution of one act is often the opening to the next act. The resolution of the first act is the introduction of plot. Then the story advances. The resolution of the second act is the start of the climax. The resolution of the climax is the start of the third act. The resolution of the third act is the end of the book. There are always resolutions, but there's also resolution scenes on smaller scales, like that moment in the scene where character A turns to character B and says, "Wow, you're a real jerk," and then storms off. That's the resolution part of this scene. These pieces, even though we're applying them now to Men in Black and specific elements, these pieces exist at several different scales throughout a story. We can divide these pieces up. We can assign them. We can zoom in on them. We can detail them. We can make them broad. We can make them vague. It's a ton of different size tools to accomplish a job. Make sense? Because that's just about the end of it. So, questions about anything. Else we will march on to our next whatever it is we've got. Yes, this was a lot of information. I tried to make it palatable. Shall we get out of here? Shall we depart? Any questions about anything? Let's get out of here. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you for checking this out. Thank you for your time and your patience. Thank you for bringing up Indiana Jones and Frodo and Interview with a Vampire and pointing out that it's Linda Fiorentino and it's called a neuralizer. Thank you. Thanks for all the views. I want to say to the YouTube people, thank you so much. I've watched this channel like percolate a little bit, and it's really made me very happy. Thank you. Thanks for checking out all the podcasts. Thanks for those nice comments. Thanks for liking and subscribing and clicking the buttons and doing all the YouTube-y algorithmy bits. I appreciate that too. We're growing, we're moving. This is good. I feel good about this. If you liked this, if you want more like this, a couple things. One, you can get me in your ears every day, wherever you get your podcasts. Go search for John Helps You Write Better, wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find me talking to you for somewhere between 6 and 12 minutes a day, Monday to Thursday, including audio of streams like this. All of them for years now are there. You can scroll through and there's a ton of stuff, tons of stuff, hundreds of hours of material, hundreds of episodes. John Helps You Write Better, wherever your podcasts are castable, available. If you want more material like this, where we walked through Men in Black and talked about scenes and stuff, you want more stuff like this, but with maybe modern stuff that's just been out in the theater, stuff that's newly rentable, other television shows and stuff, and You want to know what I think about like recent things? Head over to Patreon, patreon.com/John helps you write better, where for $2 a month, just $2, I cover a ton of things. All the Netflix, Marvel's, Disney shows, and all the Star Trek movies and all the Star Wars movies. And what did we just do? We just did Collateral, and Dune 2 was just the other day. I'm going to do Monkey Man tomorrow. Loads of stuff there, loads of walkthroughs and deconstructions and explanations and breakdowns and examples and complaints about this and celebrations of that and find the good and all that stuff broken down for $2 a month. Patreon.com/John helps you write better. Everything that isn't Patreon is available on this YouTube channel somewhere between the live tab and the videos tab. Everything I've done is there. Now, if you've gone through all that, or you're interested in something more specific and you want to know, hey, John, how can I use any of this stuff for me with what I'm doing? You can head over to johnhelpsyouwritebetter.com and you can talk to me. We can find half an hour together for free, seriously, free. We can talk about your book. We can talk about your first draft. We can talk about your query letter. We can get you published. We can talk about how to market. We can talk about whatever book thing you want. I would love to help you get published. I would love for your book to be a book. I would love for your book to be on your shelf. I don't care what kind of book it is. I don't care what kind of genre it is. I don't know how much experience you've had. Doesn't matter. I want you to write better and get your book out on the shelf. It matters to me. And if you want help, just like this, johnhelpsyouwritebetter.com. Click the button that says free appointment. Click that sucker. Take half an hour, and we will find a way to help you get from where you're at to where you want to go for free. It would seriously be my pleasure to talk to you any day of the week. I do want to point out, by the way, if you go head over to that Patreon, $2 a month, remember, you also get a link to the Discord where you can ask me literally any question you want all the time. You need your first chapter desperately edited because, oh my God, you've got a writing group coming. I got time. Send it over. Let's do it. You really want to know my thought on the most recent hootenanny on TikTok? Sure. I got time. Ask me a question. You want to ask me a question at 2:00 in the morning? I mean, yeah, I'll get to it the next morning, but you can ask me anything you want on a Discord for free. I'm there all the time. $2 a month, Patreon. Super worth it. I'm trying to make it the absolute best place you can go for $2. I think it's working. We'll find out. Again, thank you so much for being here today. I really value you. I'm grateful for you. You've made me happy. The next time I'm here in your eyes and in your ears will be, I gotta look at my thing here, will be, oh gosh, it's May, isn't it? Will be May the 7th. Oh, what are we going to do? What are we in the mood to do? What have I promised people we're doing? Where's my list of notes? I don't know what we'll do. We'll think of something. We'll think of something for sure. It'll be exciting. But until then, take care of yourself. Keep writing. Don't give up. I know it's really hard. I know it's really scary. I know rejection sucks and it can be frustrating. You can feel absolutely lost. But I need you to know that you are good enough to keep going. You don't have to quit. You can always ask for help. You can always get some information. You can always keep going. And I'd love to help you. So I hear you. Maybe we'll talk about rejection and getting better next time. Maybe that's what we'll do on May 7th. Maybe we'll break out the pom-poms and do some cheerleading and some motivating. We haven't done that in a bit. Let's give that a go. Let's put that on the list. All right. Until then, I'll talk to you soon. I love you. Be good to yourself. Be good to somebody else. I'll talk to you soon. See ya.